Welcome to this week's edition of All Around the Town. Joining me in the second half of the show will be Bobbie Dawson, who is the Executive Director of the Northumberland United Way. But to start off the show, I'm really pleased to have Sarah Tanner, the Manager of Community Services for Northumberland County, and Rob O'Neill, Manager of Food Security Services, and he looks after the Food for All warehouse under his portfolio.
Definitely been crazy times, and since all of this started at Food for All, things have changed a little bit here because we're not open to the public anymore like we normally would be. We are not utilizing our volunteers like we normally would be. So the other thing we've changed also is that we're making deliveries to the food bank rather than having the groups come to us anymore. So that's kind of changed the way we're doing business. We haven't seen a significant increase in the demand, but we've received a lot more product than we normally would, just because COVID's so much in the news, and we're receiving lots of donations, both food and financial. So we're able to still put a lot of food back out in the community, which has been really successful so far.
So one of the things, Rob, I've been able to, nowadays, making sure people get milk and produce, proteins, as well as, non-perishables are a little easier to get, but how has that been to be able to order that or to get that in?
We normally deal directly with wholesalers. So for us, it's normally not a huge deal, but when we are dealing with local grocery stores, it's been a bit of a challenge because, as anybody knows, if you're going to the grocery store looking for specific items, you might see some bare shelves. And in one of the conversations we had with one of our food banks, they were telling us that they went to their local grocery store. They were just looking to buy 10 loaves of bread for their food bank, and unfortunately, they couldn't. The grocery store couldn't give them that much. So it was nice because we already had an existing relationship with Canada Bread because we're dealing with them for the local school nutrition programs. So we reached out to them, and we're now able to buy bread directly from Canada Bread, wholesale prices, and we're able to share that with our food banks basically every time we're delivering to a food bank, they have another new item like bread available. So it's worked out actually pretty well for us in that respect.
Mm-hmm. So how many food banks? I'm trying to think how many are across the county now. We got 9 or 10 that you're servicing, food banks?
There's actually there's 13 throughout Northumberland County, and 12 of the 13 are currently still operating. Some of their operations are a little different than normal, so they're not allowing people to physically come into the food bank to do their shopping. They're doing the drive-through and finding out how many people in the family and doing some stuff up in advance. So they're still operating, but it just looks a little different than it normally would. But there's still lots of food going back into our community for sure.
So one of the things too is we've seen a lot of support nationally through Food Banks Canada and through Feed Ontario, and people have been donating through those organizations, but I know that's trickling down here. So maybe let's talk a little about that.
Sure. Food Banks Canada's got two different things. They have a national campaign to raise $150 million. So all of that money is being trickled back through food banks, through the provincial organizations like Feed Ontario. Food Banks Canada also received $50 million in federal funding specifically to help food banks. Feed Ontario received $8 million from the provincial government. So all the money that is received through Food Banks Canada is actually being redistributed as cash donations. I guess it's not donations, allocations to the food banks. So we've received some of those allocations. The first one we actually gave directly back out to the local food banks, so we didn't keep any of it for ourselves. We thought the food banks could utilize those funds any way they needed to. And then Feed Ontario is doing it a little differently. They received $8 million from the provincial government, and rather than giving that out in money, they're actually buying food and putting hampers together and distributing hampers back out to the local food banks. So in total, Northumberland County is going to receive somewhere around 4,000 of those emergency hampers, and they're nice because each hamper contains 1 week's worth of food for one person. So there's lots of hampers available in Northumberland County at the local food banks, and they're already being distributed to local families in need.
So it's wonderful to see that support coming back and helping. And it's great to think that money that you received went directly to the different food banks across the county. Then they could purchase what they required for their areas, because every area is different in who they're serving for sure. Now,
Right.
Sarah, you have a big portfolio as the manager of community services, and I'm sure there's a lot that has had to happen since we unfortunately got in this situation with the COVID-19. So, I mean, and one of those things was shifting Transition House down to the CCI here in Coburg. So let's talk a little bit about that and how you've been able to help with food security, not only there, but around the county.
We were really fortunate when we decided that the move was necessary because of the requirements through public health and being able to social distance, etc. We had a lot of support from our MPP and from local providers to be able to move down there very quickly. We were able to set up the shelter and have it running within a couple of days, but of course food was a very important item that we had to consider. So we have a range of organisations that support the shelter at dinner times. We have Port Hope Community Health Centre, we have Local Food for Local Good, we have a local bakery, Transition Health staff themselves, and other people who wish to donate are making dinners and bringing them down to share with people who are using the shelter, which is great. And I'm pleased to tell you there's often enough left for lunch as well, which is really lovely for people. Through the county, we're able to purchase some brown bag dinners, lunches rather, that we have delivered down to the CCI. That's actually through Home Plate Diner. They support us with that. And those can be distributed to people who are hungry, basically, whether they're homeless or just really feeling very vulnerable at the moment. And we distribute those through Coburg and wherever else we can get them to as well. So we have a range of ways that we've been able to support people there. But I think it's important as well that we look at other people as well, the people that are not currently using CCI. And we've been talking to a range of organisations, both not-for-profit, some local churches, we have some local businesses, and we come together looking at how we can collaborate in terms of providing food and meals across the county. So different than food banks, this is prepared meals. This is meals whether they're frozen or hot. And we have people who come to the table. We have about 12 or 14 organisations, and we talk about how we can share resources, whether it's takeout containers, whether it's we need volunteers to deliver in a certain area, whether one organisation is getting more referrals they can manage and which other organisation can help them. You know, I can tell you that in April we were able to support organisations that gave over or provided over 3,500 meals across the county, which is just fabulous.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And, you know, to me, that whole collective impact, bringing people together and working together means that you can do more. You can have a greater impact in the community, and sharing resources is so important, right? Better than working in silos. And, you know, somebody might be doing something over here, but then maybe this team can help over there. So, you know, especially we have a big county to service, so that's hard too, and a lot of rural areas.
Absolutely. And the community themselves have been really supportive as well. One of the things that we learnt about is that there's some businesses that are doing sort of a pay it forward. So if you buy a meal, you can buy a separate meal and they'll have it delivered to somebody who at the moment can't access food easily, or who's hungry or experiencing some difficulty right now. So across the county, there are a range of businesses that are doing, as I say, you know, pay it forward, and that's going extremely well. We've been able to support some of them with a little bit of support through our social services relief fund too, to enable them to just sustain what they're doing. It isn't about growing it right now, it's just sustain it through this period. So that's been exciting. We hope to continue to be able to give a different sort of support, whether that's enabling different sort of collaborations and partnerships to ensure people can keep doing what they're doing. But yeah, it's important that we do look at how we feed people. And one of the areas I think is worth talking about is, you know, we don't just look at vulnerable adults, there's also children in families. And a lot of those children use the school nutrition programs that perhaps found food through Food for All. But while they're not accessing school, it's quite possible and perhaps probable that they're hungry at home as well. And we need to remember that, you know, we need to find foods that are really accessible for those people as well, and those families, foods that are really easy for children to get hold of, whether it's fruit or yogurts or cheese or whatever sort of things they can just grab and eat as well. So we're looking right across the spectrum, you know, from children right the way through to seniors.
For sure. And I think, and I guess now it really, you know, this is going to go on for a while. So planning for the future as well. I mean, the schools aren't going back to the fall, so we have to think about the summertime as well. The, you know, children not getting fed, what can happen in the communities. That's you can't be holding barbecues and bringing people together because, we can't have big gatherings. But yeah, I think the thing is now, what can we do and how can we plan and ensuring that food security is there, because certainly with winter coming, it's a little ways away. We just got summer, but we always have to be thinking ahead and how can we work together.
And I think that's why we're interested at the county in looking at food security. So, through the food banks, looking at access to food or availability for food, that's really important. But it's bigger than that. It's about the whole system. It's about how we ensure that food can get to where it needs to go. It's about how we ensure people know how to prepare food, what food is good for them, how we can look at nutrition, whether they're children, as I say, or adults or parents or seniors. It's about how we work with local producers and ensure that there's sustainable options for people. It's about how we ensure that food continues, or feeding and food continues to be priority right across all of our programs, whether we're looking at working with homeless people, whether we're looking at working with children's in daycare. There's a whole range of people out there, and we need to sort of raise our game, I guess, to think about food security right across the board. How do we utilize the food we have? How do we make sure the food that people have is safe for them to eat? How do we recognize when it isn't? Special diets for people, whether it's a sort of, cultural reason or maybe it's a medical reason. So food security covers so many areas, and I think we're just beginning to sort of grow the way that we're including food in our planning processes right the way through.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sarah. Now, Rob, one of the things is, a lot of community groups used to access the warehouse, and we used to call ahead and make appointments. So what happens in regards to that now as we get ready to wrap up the show? I thought we should just talk about that quickly.
Yeah, actually, because the warehouse is closed, we're obviously not able to service those groups within the warehouse. So what's happening now is a lot of them are closed, so they're not doing what they were historically doing. But the longer this stretches out, the more the groups are actually reaching out to us, and they do want to start doing what they're planning to do again. So we're, picking orders, getting them ready for them in advance, and rather than them coming into the warehouse, we're just leaving them on the warehouse dock on the outside. So we're still able to do the social distancing. There's no interaction. We're still able to assist the agencies that are relying on us. So, and the longer this continues to stretch out, the more the groups are reaching out to us again and needing that assistance that they've come so heavily to rely on from us. So it's working out.
I want to thank Rob O'Neill and Sarah Tana from Northumberland County for joining me. And please stay tuned for the second half of our show. Welcome back to the second half of All Around the Town. I'm really pleased to have as my guest Bobbie Dawson, who's the Executive Director of the Northumberland United Way. So welcome, Bobbie.
Thank you for having me. How are you, Lynda?
I'm good. And how are you doing?
I'm doing well, doing well. It's staying safe and staying healthy thanks to those frontline workers who are out there on the ground, and couldn't be more grateful. So how about yourself?
Sure. I should say congratulations. We never really got to talk after the campaign achievement, but that was great in April, and I know how satisfying that is to be able to, achieve your goal and kind of go over it. And it's amazing how generous the county is every year towards the United Way. So.
Absolutely, we were thrilled. Despite everything, we surpassed the goal, and it just it was a great way to sort of end the campaign. I was introduced to Northumberland County and the people of Northumberland County as being some of the most generous people I've ever encountered, and so this was no different. And those funds will go to support, as essential programs and services in the community. So.
Yeah, for sure. But since then, let's face it, it was a different type of campaign achievement than being that it was the 50th anniversary of the United Way, and I know you had some special things planned at the campaign breakfast, but certainly it's been a whole different time now, and certainly you have been very busy I mean, United Way of Canada has established the COVID-19 fund, which all the United Ways have in their community. So we should go through the 3 different funds that have sort of been set up. We can talk about the whole local love signs, and then let's, just talk about what you've been doing, because it has been a very busy time the last few
has
months
been.
for the United Way.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So let's talk about, certainly this crisis came about, and United Way responded. United Way of Canada, established the global, the COVID-19 fund. So let's talk a little bit about that and the funds that you've been able to raise and put out.
Absolutely. So, as you know, United Ways across the country are responsive to community needs as crises come up. We're uniquely positioned in our community in having partnerships with community partners, both funded, non-funded, cross-sectoral, where we can sort of band together and utilize the power that exists within the movement across the country to create impact locally. And so, United Ways, we sort of in Northumberland sort of went, I think we need to respond to this sooner rather than later. And as you saw, you would see sort of across the country relief and response funds starting up. And then United Way Canada developed a national brand, Local Love in a Global Crisis. Mm-hmm. And since then, we've been working very closely with both the provincial and federal governments to respond. Locally, with our COVID-19 Relief Fund, we've raised over $20,000 so far, and all of those funds have gone directly back into the community. So 100% of those funds have gone to support those emergency, urgent needs, those partners that are working on the front lines, responding to the increased need with seniors, with those people experiencing homelessness, people isolating who weren't isolating previously, who wouldn't stay home previously are now staying home. There's an incredible strain on the system with all of this increased need. And so absolutely blown away by the generosity of Northumberland County again, and we continue to raise funds for our COVID-19 relief fund. We will be shifting gears to respond to rebuild and reimagine, and that's going to be sort of the focus over the next few months and years to come as we respond to the impact that this will have inevitably on the not-for-profit sector.
Mm-hmm. And that's for sure. I mean, I think sometimes people don't realize the amount of work and the amount of support the charitable and not-for-profit sector gives to our community. And it's certainly going to be a very difficult time because, it's a difficult time, and you've had great support and getting support. Our community is so generous. We see some wonderful donations happening in our community, be it in-kind donations, be it donations of food, be it monetary donations. We certainly have seen that happening across the county to support a lot of initiatives. There's no doubt about that. But, it is a tough time because many charities and not-for-profits depend on fundraising, and these unfortunately have had to be canceled. Yes. And as you know, a lot of group activities, a lot of great fun activities, golf tournaments, dragon boats. I'm sure this is not going to happen this year. So how do we all survive? And I think it's been wonderful. But the federal government gave you funds for the New Horizons funding for seniors, and that's been wonderful. You've been able to put some dollars out through that fund as well here locally.
Yes, we have. So the New Horizons Seniors Fund, we received a percentage of what had been allocated across the country. The federal government announced a $9 million allocation, and we received about 42,000 of that. Being a smaller community, we were able to fund 2 very important organizations, the VON and Alzheimer's Society, who are working very closely with seniors in the community, delivering meals, supplies, as well. There's that isolation factor. We can't stress enough, I think, during this time, how important it is to stay connected. Mm-hmm. It's always important to stay connected, but especially during this time when there might be increased anxieties, increased need for mental health and crisis support for those people living in isolation. Some of our partners have been driving seniors to their medical appointments. There are still existing other medical needs that people have. They might need to go to a cancer treatment. They might need to get dialysis. And so how are people getting to those appointments and during this time? So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to thank you, though. Community Care was one of the other organizations that received some of that funding, Community Care Northumberland, and certainly that is helping because, yeah, that's one thing that Community Care does is drive people to essential medical appointments as well as
Yes.
supporting people with Meals on Wheels and beyond. So, yeah, it's been, it's challenging for people, and it's great that that funding was there. But now you've just announced another, the Emergency Community Support Fund, which is another, which is a partnership between the United Way and community foundations and the Red Cross. So you should talk a little bit about that as well, that funding coming ahead.
Yeah, so that's a larger amount. That's the federal government announced a few weeks ago that they would be allocating $350 million across Canada to respond to some of the more urgent needs in communities. The Community Support Fund will help those community organizations who are feeling the pressure as a result of COVID-19. Locally, we've been given about $230,000 to allocate to local programs and services. The only real requirements are that the organization have a charitable registration number and that they are responding to needs as a result of COVID-19. So it's an increased need in service and staffing and supplies and those kinds of things. And there's a full list on the mynuw.org website. There's an FAQ for frequently asked questions about the fund. And we're rolling out a process that exists across the country. It's a fair and transparent, open sort of application process. We're all aligned across the country. The board of directors at Northumberland United Way will be reviewing those applications and working closely with both our MPs, our MPPs, our community foundations, our Red Crosses, all across the country, and to respond to needs in a coordinated way. We want to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts, that we are filling gaps where there's need. If you are not a nonprofit, if there is a nonprofit that is looking for funding, the Red Cross has set up a specific stream of funds for nonprofits. So we're encouraging those organizations to reach out to the Red Cross. Again, all of this information is on our website. We're accepting applications between May 19th to June 19th. And all of those funds will be disseminated by the end of September and utilized and reported back on by the end of March 2021. So hoping, that it makes some significant impact in the community. This partnership with the federal government for United Way Canada is a huge indication that they recognize the connections that United Ways have in our communities. It's really important that we continue with that momentum and continue that partnership. United Way Canada advocate, people who are advocating for the sector are looking at sector stabilization right now, not just, so how do we respond from an emergency perspective, but how do we build up the sector after all of this? What do we do in the next few months and years to come to make sure that we continue to thrive and we continue to build strong communities across the country?
Yeah, I think it's been, from a former United Wayer here, I've been very proud of the tremendous partnership that has come between the federal government and the provincial government, and actually had a nice email exchange with Dan Clement, who of course is the president of United Way of Canada, on that, because for many years we've been advocating to the federal government for lots of different things in provincial government. So it's very nice to see that they really responded to this and bringing and providing funding to the community foundations and United Ways and the Red Cross, because you are the on the ground organizations and helping charities, and it will be great to see some sort of stabilization come as well if we can do that. This new emergency fund's good that you can look at some of the things you might need to help to continue to respond in the community to the needs, because this is not a short-term thing. We've got to look at the long-term impact here, and certainly, we're going to be at this for quite a while. So, working together and having these funds, it's been really amazing to see this all happen, and something you didn't expect to all happen during your first year at the United Way.
No, I think I was saying to someone the other day, I think I was in the office for 8 months before all this happened. Not at all, did not expect this. I don't know that anyone did. I think we're all sort of adjusting to needing to change and needing to respond and needing to do things a bit differently. I'm on the phone with the board chair often talking about, our usual processes, our usual way of doing things. And we really need to reevaluate and reimagine how we're going to approach community issues well into the future. And that is going to require partnerships, cross-sectoral partnerships within the sector, in a coordinated effort. It's everyone coming together. And I think Northumberland County, if there's a place where that happens, it's definitely Northumberland County. So I'm optimistic that, with our new partnerships that we're building, and with the community the way that everyone is, that we'll be able to rebuild and reimagine an even better community in the future. And I don't know if that's overly optimistic. That just seems to be my my perspective, given what I've witnessed in the last year working at this United Way. I think we're going to be okay. I think we're going to get through this, and it's going to be even better.
Well, I think the more we collaborate and work together, we will, Bobbie. And I think that's, and certainly I know the community and a lot of organizations thank you for all the support that the United Way has been able to give during this time period. And we'll just keep working together to meet the needs of our local communities. So thanks very much for being on the show, being on All Around the Town today, and good luck with everything in the future. And I'm sure we'll be connecting too. So
thanks so much, Lynda. Thanks for all you're doing as well. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. And thanks everybody for tuning into All Around the Town here on your TV.